You're watching PM Agenda. Welcome back to the program, and it's time for our weekly segment on social media to see what issues have been playing big online and how they've been tracking across the week. We're joined once again by John Bergen, our Sky News social media director, Sarah Wilson, a social media commentator and blogger, and also from Canberra, Frank Keeney from Fairfax Radio, who also has a fair bit to do with social media as well. Thanks all of you for joining us. And this week we're also introducing some new data that gives us a few facts and figures to look at. SR7 has put together some issues tracking for us. And we're going to start with the mining tax. We've been talking a lot this week about the much weaker than expected revenue. And have a look at this. It shows you how the issue of mining tax played out on Twitter. You can see that it really peaked on Friday when the government revealed that the revenue had only come in at $126 million for the first 6 months of the tax. It peaked again a couple of days ago when Kevin Rudd here on Sky News offered his views about where the mining tax perhaps is going wrong. All up, there were, John, I think about 7,000 tweets on this issue. Is that a lot? Tweets?
Well, look, it's all comparative, I suppose it's fair to say. 7,000 tweets for the real sort of political tragic and diehards, I would estimate to be a reasonable amount. Yep. I think as we sort of wear on in this election year, we'll only see that amount increase. It was interesting to see that was 80 to 100 mentions per week. Pretty big, I'd say, metric for an issue that a lot of people are not obviously on social media, so representative of that particular sort of demographic. It's quite a significant issue, I'd say.
Yeah, Sarah, do you think is it a bubble issue for those following politics, or did it go beyond that?
Well, what I found interesting was that the most retweeted comment, or the most popular tweet, was from just, I think, an everyday blogger out there in sort of, tweetland.
Well, this tweet, I think, that SR7 had picked out, they specifically went for someone who wasn't in politics or the media. So outside of that bubble, if you like, a tweet that was from an ordinary punter on this issue.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of this in this election, is that they'll pick up not so much on the issue itself, but how it's been, I guess, played out in media and by politicians. So I think in this case it was, wasn't it something about...
I've got it here.
Yeah, it was a comment
about... It was about the Liberals, in fact, and if they're going to do away...
if they're so upset about a low revenue, or, then... haven't they?
I find it odd the Libs are complaining that the mining tax hasn't raised enough revenue. They're promising to scrap it and raise nothing. That was retweeted, as you say, quite a bit. But
that's right.
Was that the general tone, do you think, on this issue?
Look, absolutely. I think it was very interesting to see how that sort of the reach and frequency of that particular tweet from someone that wasn't sort of enshrined within the mainstream media, as we like to call it. Of course, a lot of politicians and a lot of sort of average punters out there lined up to sort of throw their 5 cents in. We had Adam Bant said, if we don't fix the tax before budget, expect more cuts like those to single parents and not enough money to fund public schools for this year. We had Rob Oakeshott obviously saying, look, it's really good that we've actually released this information. Of course, there was a lot of conjecture around why they hadn't released the revenue volume, and he also says, look, the public transparency issue has been resolved, but now there's clearly more work to be done.
Do you want to see going on here, though? It's quite a complex issue, and Twitter just can't quite carry it. It's dry and complex at the same time. So it's kind of, I'm surprised it got 7,000. I think the most interesting thing was that I think this survey reported that Kevin Rudd overtook the PM in conversation. And I thought, well, that's very telling, isn't it?
Well, I want to get to that
when he sort of interjected. That's when the spike happened.
That's right. And on the issue of Kevin Rudd more generally, not just what he had to say about the mining tax, but on the issue of Kevin Rudd himself and the sort of mentions that he's getting and the activity that he's involved in online. Have a look at this data. It shows you from a couple of weeks ago how mentions of Kevin Rudd have been going on Twitter, and they particularly peaked a couple of days ago with his comments on the mining tax. If we got that graph there, we can show just how often Kevin Rudd is being tweeted. We'll bring it to you when we do. But Frank, look, you've been watching it from there in the press gallery as well. There's no doubt that whenever Kevin Rudd is mentioned a lot in the media, it responds online, but he is particularly spikes online because he does a lot online himself.
No, that's right. He was second only to Malcolm Turnbull to sign up on Twitter as for an Australian politician. He's got over 1 million followers now, and I suppose he's become pretty good at self-promotion, which we've seen over the years. But the stuff that we've been seeing over the past couple of weeks has been the online equivalent of kissing babies at a local supermarket. We've had the YouTube video earlier this week of him singing Call Me Maybe at the Barefoot Bowls event that he organised in Brisbane. Another YouTube video before of him having yum cha with his grandchild, and certainly been pretty active responding to people, just general punters on Twitter. He's actually one of the few politicians who doesn't particularly engage very often with fellow politicians. We see a lot with Matthias Cormann, Joe Hockey, for instance, and as well Craig Emerson, who have really quite, they go at each other. But Kevin Rudd seems to ignore all that. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, Sarah, we do tend to talk about Kevin Rudd each week when it comes to social media. But if anything, he does seem to be accelerating his activity.
Yeah, there's a bit of speculation that this is all very intentional to sort of, I guess, get Julia Gillard a bit wobbly, which is a terrible thought. But that I think that came out today that there's a Labor insider suggesting that that's what's going on. But yeah,
but the bottom line is he's pretty good at this stuff. He's pretty good at this online engagement.
Yeah.
A lot of it might make people groan, but you know, people follow him in enormous numbers, and people do engage with him, share photos, and
it is dweeby though. I've got to say, I know that people are going. I'm just wondering whether we can cope with 7-8 months of this interjection and these videos doing barefoot bowling, which I'm sorry, that was fashionable 10 years ago when Secret Life of Us did it.
He's holding these barefoot bowling sets in his electorate with the young folk
to keep in touch with the youth of his constituency.
Yeah, and of course some of them are pulling out their own mobile phone and recording a little piece.
That's exactly
with
right.
Kevin and putting that online.
Yeah, that's right.
I think you've brought one along.
We have. Hopefully we'll have it for you in a moment. We had this wonderful picture of him sort of like looking great bowling with a lot of people wearing It's Our Ruddy Future t-shirts in the background, and one particular video that one particular sort of a member of his constituency uploaded of him singing Call Me Maybe. I don't know if we have it.
Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe.
Yeah, that's
and appropriate lyrics, really. I mean, you know, some people are speculating, of course, on Twitter, therefore it must be true, that this is sort of some kind of subliminal message to Julia Gillard as well.
Yeah, let's move on from Kevin Rudd. The issue the government were trying to push all week and not getting a lot of traction on, I think it's fair to say, is workplace change. Things like allowing more people to request flexible hours or have a right to formally request flexible hours, making workplace bullying a federal issue, more unpaid leave for pregnant women who get sick, and for both parents to have unpaid parental leave. The workplace relations issues, you can see there, you know, this is mentions of the Fair Work Act. It really did pick up during the week, but off a base of virtually zero. And I think all up, the number of tweets that mentioned Fair Work Act were only 211.
Dry and complex.
Pretty dry, complex, and perhaps not the go-to issue that the government had hoped for. Frank, what do you think? Is that a bit disappointing for the government on that front?
Well, that's right. I mean, it's a traditional battleground for the ALP. I mean, it's a strong point of their campaign, and they've been fighting hard over the past 2 weeks, trying to, I suppose, change the agenda and gain some traction. There's some much-needed traction, given some of the poor polling that we've seen recently. But the Liberals have again engaged on Twitter. Senator Abetz going with Bill Shorten a couple of days ago. Another day, another announcement from Bill Shorten. That's in regards to the Fair Work Commission being tasked to examine workplace bullying, for instance. And it is interesting that it is such a dry subject. It's usually the area of policy wonks. But this big spike here, it shows that it seems to be resonating somewhat with the public.
Now, and final issue that we've got some research on, and we might just have a look at this because I think it puts all of these political issues into context. The Pope resigned. It took everyone by surprise. And while we were talking about 7,000 mentions of the mining tax, the resignation of the Pope, and this is just in Australia, generated 2.2 million tweets. I think it's a reminder to everyone.
And most of them were puns.
Right.
Yeah, and then those that weren't puns referred to Kevin Rudd,
Right.
potentially putting his hand up to be the next Pope.
Ha, ha. Were there any good jokes, John, or are they all
There's a
shockers?
few of them. Let me just find them. Well, Jim Gaffigan said, "Wow, the Pope is not taking my Grammys loss particularly well." The other one is, "If you'd like to throw your hat into the ring to be the next Pope, make sure it's a big one." So a suitable mixture of sort of like deference and respect for the Pope, a few wisecracks and puns as well.
One thing I found interesting is that the research pointed to the fact that a lot of the tweets were about respect and respect for the fact that he's resigned, done the right thing, he's ill, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
First Pope into 600 years to do it. I actually thought that this pointed to what Twitter can often do, and that can be very, very sycophantic. So people get on this kind of thread. Any other time, I can tell you that Twitter is full of criticisms, blatant criticisms of the Pope. But when something like this happens, it's really interesting.
A civilising tone might emerge.
Yeah, civilising and potentially, I think, sycophantic. That whole getting on the bandwagon of the right, the right tweet tone. Yeah.
We've got to go in a minute, but tweet of the week from you, John. What did you pick?
The tweet of the week would definitely have to go to Labor MP Andrew Leigh. With being Valentine's today, he kicked off a bit of a hashtag frenzy last night with what's known as Election Valentines. I hope we have a few to put up on the screen, but basically he had a bit of a call out to have these sort of wonderful puns and play on words, and a few of them, where have we got, was "May our love be as long-lasting as the Count and Hare Clark voting system. Have I polled you lately to say that I love you, and it's been a long time since I felt this way." So it's really good to see them sort of embracing the humour of the medium.
Kevin Rudd's.
That's right, of
Roses
course.
are red, violets are blue. Was it if you're at a loss, question time starts at 2.
Look, on that note, happy Valentine's Day to you all. Frank, Sarah Wilson, John Bergen, thanks so much for that.
Thank you.